Borralho says, I hear there's a card in Australia on February in 2026. Robert Whittaker, what do you think about a dance in your hometown? Rankings-wise, it makes sense in the sense that they're right beside each other in the middleweight rankings. Borralho's ranked number 7. Robert Whittaker is ranked number 8. Borralho is coming off the first loss in his UFC career to Nasruddin Imavov in September, on September 6th. Robert Whittaker is coming off a split decision loss to RDR in July. Prior to that, he lost to Khamzat Chimaev. The Ritter fight was a close fight, hence the split decision. Could have gone either way, but Robert Whittaker is operating at 50% rate in terms of his wins and losses. He's 2-2 in his last 4, 3-3 in his last 6, 4-4 in his last 8, so operating at 50%. But aside from the De Ritter fight, he's only losing to champions. The current champion, Khamzat Chimaev, the champ before that, DDP, and Israel Adesanya, one of the greatest champions in middleweight history, and one of the best middleweights of all time in the UFC. Whittaker versus Borralho in February is a possibility because Whittaker does want to fight on that rumored card in Australia in February, and he doesn't seem to care about who the opponent is, so it's a decent call-out for Borralho in terms of realistically getting the fight.
I put my hand up for the rumored Sydney card in February. It's been too long since I fought in Australia, so I'm really... I want to fight in Australia. I want to fight in front of my fans, and I want my family and friends to be there as well. So that's kind of the date that I set. Who they give me is who they give me.
In the middleweight division, you have 3 matchups this weekend. The main event, RDR versus Brendan Allen. Then you got Azamat Bakoy versus Yusri, and then also Danny Barlow versus Jordan Santos. And then the following weekend, you got Junyoung Park versus Ikram Alaskarov, UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi. Then at UFC 322 next month on November 5th in New York, you got 3 middleweight fights. Rodolfo Vieira versus Bo Nickel, Gregory Rodriguez versus Roman Kopylov, which should be a slugfest. Then you got Gerald Mearshart versus Eric McConaughey Jr. Following week in Qatar, November 22nd, you got Miktabek Oralbai taking on Jack Hermanson. Oralbai moving up from 155 to 170. Jack Hermanson moving down from 185 to 170, meeting in the middle. And there's 2 middleweight fights in December scheduled so far. Mansour Abdul Malik versus Antonio Tricoli on December 6th. Abdul Malik should be a decent-sized favorite in that one. Then December 13th, Cezary Olasejic, the brother of Mihail Olasejic, taking on Cesar Almeida in his UFC debut. That's a tough UFC debut. That's going to be a fun striking battle, but with all the kickboxing prowess of an Almeida, he should be a favorite in that one, but interesting fight nonetheless. Ian Garry says that the original plan was for him to face Sean Brady in the main event of UFC Vancouver this weekend. He is certain that both sides agreed, but for some reason, the UFC changed their mind and went in a different direction.
It's not my decision as to what the UFC want to do, but we were offered a fight. We both said yes. Never came to fruition. I woke up one morning, seeing that RDR and Fluffy Hernandez was announced as the main event in Vancouver. I was like, all right, fuck, I guess it's not happening.
That was the original plan? This weekend, you guys fighting?
Yep.
Wow.
I was offered. I said yes to it.
Do you think he said yes?
I know he said it. We both have the same
Yeah, Lloyd.
We both said yes.
Right.
We both said yes. UFC just changed their mind.
Do you have any idea why?
I don't care why. If that makes sense. At the end of the day, the truth is, I'm getting what I originally want and sought after when I went to, after my fight with Pat. I wanted whoever came out of the fight from the world title fight not victorious, because those were the 2 best guys at the time, right? So you fight for a championship, and that's what matters. And Bilal had the belt. He has knocked out number 2 and smashed number 3. So I wanted Bilal from the get-go. I said yes to Sean Brady because, as you know, if someone offers me a fight, I say yes.
A couple months back, Sean Brady was saying that Ian Garry might have been dragging his feet, which led to them not fighting.
So I got a call from my manager right around International Fight Week, so like the end of June time frame, about me and Ian fighting in Chicago. I said yes. Didn't hear anything for weeks. I'm assuming the UFC moved on. Recently, they hit us up. They said, me and Ian, main event in Vancouver. I said, yes, immediately. Immediately. Yes, let's go. I've been wanting to fight since May. And these were the only ones I've been offered. I said yes twice. Now, I don't know why Ian's fucking was dragging his feet or whatever he was doing. And now they put in RDR and Fluffy. So now, once again, we're sitting and waiting. So, thanks, Ian. Just lost another main event because of you, my man.
Sean Brady will end up taking on Michael Morales on November 15th. And then 1 week later, Ian Garry will take on Belal Muhammad. So within the span of the week, a lot of the top welterweights will be fighting. JDM, Belal Muhammad, Sean Brady, that's the top three. Then also Ian Machado, Garry, and Michael Morales. So 5 of the top 9 welterweights will be competing within the span of the week next month in New York and then Doha. One Championship doing a show. This is the bout order for the November 16th card. 173. There's a couple title fights in the MMA space on this card. Rug versus Anatoly Malikin for the heavyweight championship. That'll be an interesting rematch. And Christian Lee versus Alibeg Rasulov at 155 in the lightweight division. Jamagulov versus Dvorak, December 28th in Octagon MMA. Chuck Liddell got married over the weekend to his girlfriend Heidi. Some people who were in attendance were Matt Hughes and Forrest Griffin. Paulie Malignaggi doesn't like Dana White to be in the boxing space, especially with him trying to amend the Ali Act. Malignaggi feels that guys like Ngannou and Conor moving into boxing to get their biggest paydays shows that there are protections in boxing that aren't in the UFC, and Dana White's trying to come into the boxing space and rid those protections from the sport of boxing.
Dana said they've generated Zupa. They generate billions of dollars. It's great for the sport. The UFC model has shown that it generates billions of dollars. Billions of dollars for who, dude? Not for the fighters. When a guy like Dana White talks about this model generates billions of dollars and so on and so forth. Let's say it did, even for boxing. Let's say if it did. Without the Ali Act, you know what it's going to be because his resume, his body of work already tells you what it's going to be. His body of work tells you that it's going to be all for the corporate sponsors, all for the big shots, including him, and very little piece of it goes to the fighters. So when we talk about how is this thing going to benefit this or how is this thing going to benefit that, it's not like we're talking to a guy who doesn't already have a prior road, a resume that you can look back on and say, how does he behave? How does he do things? How does he behave financially? This guy robs fighters left, right, and center. You could say allegedly, right? I mean, because you could say, considering the main event purses of UFC fighters compared to what the UFC shows generate, where's all the money going? The majority of the money ain't going to the fighters like it would in boxing if a fighter generates that kind of money. But yet then this guy goes on a Joe Rogan podcast and he'll talk about how he lost $1 million in one night. Money that he's robbing from fighters. All right, so that's not a person I can respect coming into my business or any business. If he stays away from me, I stay away from him. I don't need to talk about him. But we're going to talk about a guy like that. No, boxing doesn't need a guy like that. Boxing already has had plenty of people like that we've already dealt with. The boxing landscape, regardless of having people like that. And if people could get away with it, they would, obviously. But boxing has a landscape through the Ali Act that prevents that kind of demented, perverse taking advantage of fighters to that degree. At least boxing has that protection. By removing the Ali Act, you risk not having that protection. That's all I'm saying. And sure. and there's going to be different options, different opinions. Look at Francis Ngannou. What he had to do to make him boxing. Look at Conor McGregor himself. Speaking of McGregor, he had to go to boxing to make that kind of money. So ultimately, why did those guys go to boxing? Because boxing allowed that kind of loophole, right? That the UFC, the MMA in general, does not allow, right? So in an open market, the fighter has more advantage if he reaches the top. Now, people will say, oh, lower level to lower level, it's similar purses. Yeah, of course. Lower level to lower level, similar purses. But I made this example not long ago. I remember looking at the end of my career, looking at a Max Holloway versus Volkanovski fight matchup, and there was purses being discussed on a website. I looked at Max Holloway's purse. Max Holloway was still a top star at that time. I was at the end of my boxing career. Guy was making the same money I was making in boxing at that time, not at my prime. At that time, okay. Now, granted, maybe he had a couple pay-per-view points, which gave him a little bit more money. But this is a guy who probably is going to be a UFC Hall of Famer in his prime years at the time, and he's making what I'm making at the end of my career. Okay, dude, that's not a guy anybody should be working for in combat sports. All right, bro. Like people broach the conversation, talk to the conversation. This is not a good person. Not that boxing is full of good people either, but I'm saying this person himself is changing the landscape, not for the better in any way, especially for the fighters and for the competitors.